Hi everyone! In this video I'd like to show you how to implement a very basic to-do list app in Quarkus from scratch. This example is a backend only project and is really very simple, but it's just as quick to set up. Let's get started right away. Step 1. Creating the application. To get started with a Quarkus application, the easiest way is to go to quarkus.io and click Start Coding. This takes you to a kind of initializer that lets you generate an application skeleton. You can use Quarkus with Maven or Gradle, so you'll first need a group and an artifact ID, which we'll enter here. Next, select the Java version you want to use. Since I don't have Java 25 installed on my computer yet, I'll choose Java 21 here. Below, you can now select so-called extensions. Well, extensions are central to Quarkus. They provide specific dependencies to implement certain features, such as a database connection or the ability to implement REST APIs. However, they go far beyond simply providing dependencies. But I might cover this in a later video. Let me know in the comments whether this is interesting for you. Here you can either select individual extensions you want to use or, and I recommend this for getting started, you specify the type of application you want to implement and the initializer will automatically select the recommended extensions for you. For example, I want to implement a REST API here and the initializer selects a single extension named Quarkus REST for that purpose. By clicking on Generate Application, you can then download and use the application skeleton. Step 2. Starting the application. In the next step, unzip the application skeleton and load it into the IDE of your choice. I'm using IntelliJ Ultimate here, but that's not necessary since I'm not using any Ultimate features for this video. The Community Edition works just as well as does any other IDE that supports Java. In the application skeleton, you'll find a Maven wrapper, so you don't have even to need Maven installed on yourself. To start the application, just run Maven wrapper and invoke the dev goal in the Quarkus Maven plugin to launch the application. After the application starts, Quarkus will hopefully report a successful launch and you can navigate to localhost on port 8080 to see this page here. If so, congratulations, your first application in Quarkus now runs on your machine. Step 3. Understanding the basics. To get started with development, you need to understand a few basics. To begin with, it's enough to understand that Quarkus is a microprofile implementation. Microprofile is a specification from the Jakarta EE world that aims to implement microservices with Jakarta EE or formerly Java EE. Quarkus implements this specification and aligns its fundamental architecture for operation in a cloud-native environment. I'd be happy to cover what that exactly means in detail in another video. Just leave me a comment if you're interested in that. For the implementation, this means that you can implement a Quarkus application just as any other microprofile application. In the skeleton, for example, you see this greeting resource with annotations from the Jakarta VRS package. This is JAXRS, which allows you to map a class method to specific URL path and HTTP verbs. Quarkus will then take care of mapping these methods when a corresponding request is received. Step 4. Implementing the TODO-backend. In the final step, I'll now implement the TODO-backend. Short disclaimer here, the implementation will be very rudimentary and store everything in memory directly in the REST controller. However, additional videos covering persistence and related topics are already in the works. First, I rename the greeting resource to tasks resource. Next, I need a data model that defines what a to-do list entry should look like. Let's say it has an ID, a title, a description, and let's say a due date. And here I wanted to use a record. I already have a method here for getRequest that returns a media type of text plain. That doesn't work for me. I'd rather use JSON here. Then the method returns a task instead of a string. Let's say a getRequest to this URL should return all tasks, so I'll name the method listAllTasks. I'll simply store the task directly in memory as said in a map that maps task IDs to the task itself. In the method, I'll just retrieve the values from this map and return them as a list. And here I immediately run into an error since I obviously have to return a list of tasks, not a single one. So great, we already have the first method. Now let's add a method to load a single task based on its ID. To do this, I'll define a new method that takes the ID of a task as an argument. To ensure the mapping works, I need to add either a query parameter or a path parameter to the path. I'll use a path parameter here to exactly indicate that the ID is required. Additionally, I need to map the method parameter to this path parameter, which is done using the path param annotation. Then I can simply use the parameter return the task with its ID. Perfect, that was easy. Now a method for saving a new task. The same pattern applies here. I create a method, add the mapping to a put request, and define the request body as the method's sole parameter. Quarkus and any other microprogram implementation then populates this parameter with the request body of the put request. Finally, I add to all methods that they should return JSON, and I'm basically done with this very simple implementation. I don't have a delete function here, but I think you can imagine what that would look like. Step 5, finally testing the application. Let's test our very first example here. I like to use IntelliJ's built-in HTTP client here, but any other API client will work as well. Let's first display all tasks. This fails with a 404 HTTP code because I forgot to change the root path of my REST resource from hello to tasks. Now it should work, and indeed it does. You might be wondering why I didn't have to restart the server or perform a rebuild. Well, that's a nice feature of Quarkus. In local development, Quarkus comes with a special class loader that lets you deploy changes in a fraction of a second without restarts or even rebuilds. A very hot reload, so to speak. You still search in vain for this feature in another framework in the Java world. Next, let's load a task based on an ID, let's say ID 1. Here you'll see an HTTP 204 response since we don't have any task with that ID. In general, we don't have any tasks yet. So let's try to change that by sending a corresponding put request. For this, I'll define a request payload with a content type of JSON. In the body, I'll define a task, let's say with a title buy coffee, a corresponding description, and an arbitrary due date. Okay, perfect. When you execute this request, you'll probably see an HTTP 415 unsupported media type. So Quarkus can't handle application JSON. In fact, when setting up the application, we only use the Quarkus REST extension. While this generally allows us to implement REST endpoints, it doesn't automatically provide support for every arbitrary media type. To support JSON, we need the Quarkus REST JSON extensions, for example. Extensions are generally named so that the technology used to support the corresponding content types is evident from the name. Quarkus REST JSON thus allows us to write REST endpoints with marshalling handled by the JSON library. That gives us support for JSON and XML right away. Again, no server restart is required. Quarkus can also reload extensions on the fly, which you can see here in the console output. Quarkus lists all the extensions currently available in the application. In this case, REST JSON. This means adding tasks now works as well, as you can see here. Let's now reload all tasks. And here too, it simply works. A task with ID 0 doesn't exist, nor does one with ID 2. Let's quickly create a task with ID 2. Let's say, go to sports. Okay, good. There are now 2 entries in the task list. Wonderful, everything works and the admittedly very rudimentary application is running. So congratulations, you have created your first simple application in a very short time. Feel free to leave a comment below about which topics in Quarkus are generally interesting for you. I'll be happy to prepare more videos like this. I wish you a wonderful day and see you next time.